Okay, this is a famous shipwreck known as the Uluburen. Kind of sounds like a Tolkien word or name for ancient elves, doesn't it? Somewhat. This is a recreation of what that would have looked like shortly after it had gone down, thousands of years ago now. You can see that prow that's on it that kind of looks Phoenician, and the way that the sails would have been set on it. But a lot of people said that this may have been Minoan, and that Minoans are cooked up with it. Ancient Greece, and the ancient Canaanites of the Levant in the Wayback Machine. There's an anomaly here that shows that they found an immense amount of treasure that goes with it, and it's almost conspicuously like whenever they found the Antikythera mechanism, for it was found by sponge divers. And whenever they were diving down in the area, all of a sudden they noticed all these urns and everything laid out like a ship had been there at one time, all laden down, but rotted away. Remember this blue ocean here in a little while. So it's one of the oldest and wealthiest shipwrecks ever discovered. This is going to be a two-parter, and I'll have the second part up in your top left-hand corner where we discuss Michigan copper and something that's over here, and not necessarily on the elf on the shelf that I talked about, but it's over there in a box. Just doesn't have enough verifiers, but we're going to go through it. Some other researchers have gone far in depth into it. The Uluburen is a 3,300-year-old shipwreck discovered off the coast of Uluburen, which is Grand Cape near Kos, in southwestern Turkey or Anatolia. It's among the oldest ships ever discovered and contained one of the wealthiest and largest known assemblages of late Bronze Age items found in the Mediterranean. The ship was carrying over 20 tons of cargo, believed to be a royal order, like had been commissioned for a royal order. In fact, in total, more than 18,000 spectacular artifacts have been discovered and recovered, including precious jewels, luxurious raw materials, which we'll talk about in depth, especially in part two, and even the golden seal of the Egyptian queen Nefertiti. And this would put it at a dating time also, but it also makes a connection where people have said, well, knowing of the Amarna period and the things and the interaction that were going on, that would have been her seal designating that this was her cargo and it had come from her. They would see it, they would know, and so on. And this was shipped up to her. So Ari had come on from Egypt and gotten laden down at that point. The Uluburen was first discovered in 1982 by Mahmed Keker, who is a local sponge diver on a steep rocky slope at a depth of about 44 to 52 meters, with artifacts scattered down to 61 meters. Excavating it was a mammoth task and required 11 consecutive campaigns of 3 to 4 months each during the Great Period there, conducted by the Institute of Nautical Archaeology, totaling 22,413 dives between 1984 and 1992 to make a full recovery of it. The ship itself was 15 meters long, so roughly 50 foot, and it's the earliest known example of a ship constructed using the advanced mortise and tenon technique, where planks are joined by flat tongues of wood inserted in the slots cut into the planks. It's cut into the side of it, and then they put a biscuit of another type of wood which swells whenever moistened a whole lot more than the regular wood does, and kind of helps hold it together and squeeze it in a way. It helps to keep it down on how much bitumen and things like that would have had to been used to seal it and so on. But one thing that they said goes along with this ship is you have to keep it wet, and you have to keep it in the water or whatever, because it'll leak there until it gets wet and hooks back up together, or it has to be reconditioned every time if you take it out of the water for any long period of time. The wood that makes up the ship was Lebanese cedars. indigenous to the mountains of Lebanon, southern Turkey, and the central Cyprus area. The featured image is an accurate replica wreck of the Uluburen, showing how the ship would have once appeared, and that was the original picture we were looking at. And it's still got a tattering of the sails there and the ropes and everything, so one could imagine it may have looked like that after it had been down there for 100, 200 years and still had that same look and slowly faded away, melted into the ground effectively and away in the water. So here's another picture of it, and conspicuously to me in this picture, it looks like there's a wall right here behind us. Now it has weird projections on it in some parts, but those are corals that have been growing on this for a long, long time and died, and then other corals started growing on those, and it made it up live rock and everything, but it has a conspicuous look, let's just say. But that's not what we're really looking at here and what we're really talking about. For if we look right here at this diver and what he's looking down on and the rocks with the holes in it, this was in the keel area of the boat, and it would have had the anchors here, and so they're all attached up to give the ballast that's there. One thing I noted that people said about this is that they didn't have full ballast, that the amount of cargo, because they had 20 tons, was apparently the amount. They were putting the heaviest amounts at the bottom, making it the larger portion of the ballast that it should have been. But it carries right here from just out of the picture in the bottom to all the way across the second diver and up through there. We'll look at some more pictures here in a minute that show some more effects, and in the second part we'll definitely too. So these are all the anchors, and you can see the holes that are done through them, and these hold anchored stelae can be found in a lot of places where they ended up uprooting the ship and taking it and flipping it over and making a giant hall or houses out of it or barns out of it and so on. And then these stelae with the hole in it that was once an anchor with that hole going in ended up sighting the sun. Yeah, because these people had to do with agriculture and farming and things too, and because of their nautical experience, they were welled into it, and it looks at a twofold way that they were already being nautical and having to figure it all out with the sky and the way it's twisting to make it to where they could be correct navigators and such. But also the study of the heavens that went along with this, having to do with archaeoastronomy, twofold, made it to where they were very dominant on the ocean and the sea here at this time. We talk about the ancient Phoenicians and stuff, but this is about at the cusp of that part forming where we think that that was coming on effect. But you look at this and it was well in effect with it going on, and people just didn't record such things necessarily. So yeah, so originally anchors stowed near the bow. At the time of sinking, the ship was carrying over 20 tons of cargo, including both raw materials and finished goods, which have been traced back to at least 7 different cultures, and I'm going to go with 8 then, including the Mycenaean culture, Syro-Palestinian, so forerunners of the Phoenicians, but of course, this is the people we're talking about in the ancient Canaanites, Cypriot, Egyptian, Kassite, Assyrian, and Nubian objects. Yeah, even Nubia, well, they had some ebony wood, but they probably got it from the Egyptians, who had got it from Nubians, and so on. The main cargo is approximately 10 tons of primary Cypriot copper, they say, but there's something about that copper, and in part 2 we're going to definitely get into that, because it has a purity level that says that it's not Cypriot copper. In fact, there's been a few findings of such in the form of 354 ingots, and the Uluburen also contained the earliest known intact ingots of glass. 175 of disc shaped were covered, which were colored with cobalt blue, turquoise, and a unique lavender. So that's purple and kind of royal here. So how long did they have purple associated with their abilities and stuff? But also these glass pucks here, which almost looks like that they were made in muffin pans. to certain amounts here. Now, the one on the left is colored with cobalt, and the one on the right has been colored with copper and copper sulfate. Remember that blue color that we're looking at here in a moment when we go into copper mining. I'll do it at the end of this one and then also in the other, just to show what we're talking about and how beautiful it looks to go into these mines. It reminds one of dwarven tales and stories about gem-covered walls and things. Other than materials included a ton of terebinth resin contained in around 150 Canaanite jars, most likely for incense, logs of Egyptian ebony, ostrich shells and elephant tusks, hippopotamus teeth, seashells, and tortoise shells. So this was something fancy going out right here. This was, whenever they talk about going to the land of Punt and getting all this neat stuff or whatever that they don't usually get from other people, some of that stuff is listed in here. And ostrich shells can come from a few different places back at this time, other than the place that ostriches are trapped right now. But these elephant tusks also, and hippopotamus teeth, it's ivory trade, and so on, seashells and tortoise shells. Now the finished goods were just as luxurious. Egyptian objects of gold, electrum, which is a mix, silver and stone, Canaanite jewelry, thousands of beads made of glass, agate, carnelian, quartz, and faience, and amber, which of course comes from northern Europe. And finely crafted figurines, including a bronze female statuette, partially clad in gold of Syro-Palestinian origin. This is Anat, as in Anatolia. This is where that comes from, for the old Canaanite gods and goddesses were El, as in the Bible, and Tempel, Angel. I could go on with El. But his son, Baal, and their daughter, Anat, and that's where its origin comes from. And this figurine was one of those that you can commonly see that are in gold clad, and a lot of times some of the gold is off of it, but it's a fine foiled gold that's been put around to it. Much thinner than tin foil, if you will. But tin's got something to do with this too. We'll get more into that in the second part. But one of the most unique and precious items was a scarab bearing the cartouche of Queen Nefertiti herself. Recently we did a video or a few videos where we're talking about Nefertiti and how they of that dynasty there, and they've done the genetics because they wanted to see in King Tut and his genetic maladies and all of those situations, and if there was inbreeding, because an earlier test indicated, but they wanted to act like that was false. Well, they checked it out again and it was true, and then they wanted to come out with the information of just saying, about what it was, and the genetics and haplogroups not coming out, but it did. And Akhenaten and Tut were R1b haplogroup with the mitochondrial DNA K that comes from before her with Queen Ty and Nefertiti and so on. But we go back before that also, and recently another paper's come out on Yuya, or Thuya and Yuya, the two blonde mummies that a lot of people said were Joseph of the Bible and so on. But Yuya shows up to be haplogroup G, and all of these contain into people that were in ancient Anatolia and northern, and people that make up far Western Europeans nowadays in a huge cluster. 50% of the people that are pretty much down the coast from France, Spain, and all of the UK, as if you will, but concentrated hard in the Irish and Scottish and British Islands area, up to 70%. In fact, they found somebody that really could have come completely directly from his lineage in a modern day. In fact, it was conspicuous how they said that it would have to have come through a straight lineage to end up being as close as it is. It was like a 92% match or something, and that really means a lot. It says that he possibly could actually be his great grandkid somehow. Well, not from King Tut. He didn't have any heirs after it, but from other of Akhenaten and Thuya and the others connectives that made that dynasty, and that could be carried on because that's what they're truly looking at, and King Tut's dynasty to verify it. Here's the cartouche they're seeing in here in one of these seals. And a lot of these would be sealed up, sealing jars and sealing certain things where they used cartouches like this, or the scrolls that they had, which would probably be sent along with it and probably disintegrated if it was in scroll form, would be sealed with wax and then something like this pressed into it, like they have the rings, and that got carried on into England also with the kings and so on, ancient seals. Other artifacts, though, included ivory cosmetic containers. So they're fancy stuff here. A trumpet carved from a hippopotamus incisor, and I'd like to see that. I don't think I've seen that. I can imagine that it would just be a common trumpet, like a bugle or looking thing. But bronze tools and weapons, lead net and line sinkers for using nets and everything, and apparently it didn't look like it was them occasionally fishing with it, but there were enough of them in a group together in mass that would have said this is part of her things too. Knitting needles for repairing fish nets, also fish hooks, an actual harpoon, a bronze trident, yeah, like Neptune, and wooden riding boards. However, the largest group of manufactured goods on the ship was this Cypriot fine and coarse ware ceramics. And you can look in here and see that there's a few different styles of ceramics that are in this picture. Let me zoom in and I'll go back out. I know it gets a little more grainy. But you can see these giant jugs that are up in here, and then these smaller teardrop jugs that are not shaped the same as these pot jugs that are here. And in fact, there actually are some pots and kettles like looking here. And this version here, which is red ochred out, you can still see to this day in its painting and its thing, is not the same as some of the other ones. And one wonders, well, you've got 1,800 artifacts in here altogether. What all looks neat about it? And we could do a separate video about that, I may, because this is, it has all these artifacts associated with it. It's real neat. One thing we're going to focus on in this and the next video I talk about are these right here. And these are those ingots of copper, and it's blister made, poured in a way, but it's poured in a way to make it look like an ancient skin. Like almost this trade goes back to where people used ancient skins for trade and so on, and this has something to do with it. But then also there's the golden fleece and that concept that goes with it. Well, this isn't golden, this is copper, but people have targeted this as the fabled orichalcum. Now that orichalcum is a strange name, conglomerative, where ore sounds like ore, doesn't it? But chalcum, well, the chalcolithic is the Bronze Age, and weird lithic means stone, so it's like super Stone Age coming in with that, Copper Age, I said bronze, with that Copper Age. And then the thing that adds to this, that made it all stronger, better metals, rather than using arsenic forms and things like that, for a type of blend, was adding tin into it. And that took it all to another level. So we have the Copper Age, then the Bronze, and then we come to the Iron Age. But you can see this ingot here that's there, but also there's a whole row of them right here. And tons of it. And so there was mining going on to a point, and it's not associated with Egypt, but perhaps they're getting their portion, their share in some way. We'll get into that in that second part, though. So, analysis of the artifacts that were personal possessions of the crew members, such as tools, oil lamps, and writing boards, suggests that the crew were Canaanite and Cypriot, although at least two were Mycenaean. Now, I don't know what gave them this clue, perhaps certain artifacts they were wearing and stuff that are associated. Well, over here in this pile is, well, there's more than enough for one person. This is two people, because I don't think they found the actual skeletal remains of any of these people, if any pieces of it. But yet, two of them are Mycenaean Greeks, and the others were Canaanite or Cypriot. Perhaps they were also Minoan, because it seems to connect with that situation quite well, but people don't want to talk about the possibilities of that connection, and they don't want to talk about that copper very much either. But that's one of the standouts. Sure, they might find some little jewel-laden thing that really shows you some workmanship back at the time this dates to that would blow your mind. But they might also find something else that's small and incredible, like the Antikythera mechanism. Something along that maybe these guys were using in their ship themselves. It wasn't supposed to be part of the cargo necessarily, like some of these things aren't, of course. But they also might find something too, like, well, what could it be? Well, it might be right in your face the whole time. For here's a bunch of different people's stuff, and these people are going around to all different locations and returning. But that copper shows where it probably comes from not any of the places that they try to associate it to, or even Cypriot copper. The provenances of the artifact suggest that the late Bronze Age Aegean was part of an international trade of network, perhaps based on royal gift giving in the Near East, in which ships sailed the Mediterranean on a circular route from Syro-Palestine to Cyprus into the Aegean and occasionally as far west as Sardinia, then back home via North Africa and Egypt, they say, and they try to show you this map. And so they're ping-ponging around the Mediterranean here on this end and up through the Aegean there. And they say, well, here's some of that metal, but it's associated with the Hittites, and that's apparently where they were going with that, is right up here into that Mitanni Hittite type of area. Now the Assyrians are over here and attached with the Tigris and Euphrates rivers here, and of course that's the top of what would be the Sumerians of old. But tin also can come from as far away as over here, not farmed out as well though. But then we have that effect where it's a well-known fact that a lot of this tin that we're talking about comes from Cornwall, up there in England, and they had ancient trade, so apparently it went a hell of a lot farther west than Sardinia. In fact, if you're looking at this map, conspicuously where it is Mycenaeans at, there are these routes that are kind of gray and not black, going that way, hooking up to ancient Italy, Etruscans, Spain, coming out that Pillar of Hercules area and taking a right, and Cadiz, and going up the coast. And where were they getting this copper from? Were they getting it from some people right up there at the coast that were getting it from somewhere else? Or were they making the journey all the way to somewhere else? Strangely, some of their voyages, like the Iliad and the Odyssey, are so expansive that they took years to make the traverse to come back. Yeah, some of it's kept in those ancient tales and that mythology that goes in there, but of course some of it's just fanciful tales. So they're showing this ancient trade route that's concentrated over here, they talk about, but we well know that North Africa and the Berbers had contact with these people too, all the way out to the Pillar of Hercules. But then that tin that comes out right here in the Copper Age into bronze, the collapse happens and things fade, and perhaps some of the routes get used a whole lot less all of a sudden. Then maybe just the Phoenicians are doing it, and they lace a bunch of these tales out, so they try to keep people from wanting to go there because there be dragons. Well, we've studied enough about dragons recently and what that correlates to, and they weren't lying, were they? For that ship that we started this thing out with could have easily had a dragon head motif on it. And those people seem to have come all the way into the Americas at one time. Or was it a lot? Or were these people making the trek on past the people that we're talking about and before they became the Vikings and the Danish people? The Uluburen is considered one of the most important and fascinating sea wrecks ever discovered and has provided archaeologists with an abundance of information about ancient society and culture across the Mediterranean, perhaps farther, including Bronze Age shipbuilding, sea routes, trading practices, and the production and exchange of raw materials and luxurious goods. Today, the remains of the Uluburen and its cargo are housed in the Bodrum Museum of Underwater Archaeology. But make no mistake, finding something this huge that looks like it's all or predominantly going to one site, all as kind of a gift thing, when they talk about lavish gifts and da-da-da, and I hooked you up with all kinds of BS. They weren't lying. There's a lot going on. These traders, though, they used to go and pick up a whole bunch of stuff from one site, buying it with a bartering trade of things that they had already gotten before that these people really want, and taking it to the next area and selling it off, but having something to go to the next area. And of course, what they sell that for, they trade with these other people that really want that. And so they have those jugs there that are full of incense or all kinds of stuff, olive oil and dates and ancient fish sauce that they talked about that was real popular from North Africa. So, well, there we got to see the wreck and what it looks like, and looking upon it there, you see all those rows of ingots, and then that one big one that looks like it's closer to us up here. But if that glass too, that really has something neat to do with it, and it's associated with that. And blue glass, and the blue of this ocean. And one's made from cobalt, the other was made from copper of those glasses. Well, let's look at an ancient copper mine and see what that looks like. It's quite interesting for people who have probably never seen it. Let me see, it's way down here. Being only over 20 minutes, I could almost try to do the second part, but I know how much information it has in it, and it doesn't seem very feasible. Let's see here if I can. Having a little trouble loading. Bing. So here are these guys going into a Cornish copper mine, and there's first, you have to go a long distance really just to even get down into it. It's quite incredible. I'll cut to the chase here a little bit. You can start to see some copper and some green. They have to go through water pouring through it in places, and that greenish blue that you're seeing there is all copper. It's eroding through the rocks and leaving its mineral deposit behind. But wait till you see this. I hope this is showing up good for you. This is what it would look like in an ancient copper mine. Whoa, look at that blue glow. And it's everywhere. Mind blown. Mind blown. But also, whenever he finally gets down here where these guys are shaking their lights at the dude, like, come on, this way. You can see rocks are stacked up on the sides. Here's a flow of it really coating the entire wall again. Almost like blood veins of the earth. And don't you know this blue color was sacred? And this is what some of that blue glass is mixed with and to make, whereas the other one was made from another form. So he finally gets down here to these guys, and They're like, hey, what's going on? But this is not even where the mine is really going. It's on for quite a bit further. But look at those stalagmites of copper that are forming in it from this drip thing. You see how the rocks all formed up there on the sides of it? Well, that's actually piled to the side from them mining, and rocks that apparently don't contain very much or just a little bit, enough of it. You look at it and you go, oh, that's got to have a lot of it. No, they were working through a raw mine that was solid with it here. And in fact, about another 100 yards ahead is where they're at with it and had worked more. And they've literally gotten tons of copper out of this mine to make a whole bunch of wires, pennies, all kinds of things. Like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy. And look in your top left-hand corner, and I'll try to get the other one ready and upload it at the same time. And we'll visit this mine again. Peace.